It really is a privilege to be here this morning and to just share some of what I've learned over the number of years that I've been following this, and I think it's particularly personal to me. So I'll start off with some objectives that we're hoping to achieve today, and those are really, there are two kind of components to this. One is we go out and we actually talk to people, and how do we engage with them? This is really, really important from my perspective. And in life, it's so important to build bridges, to actually walk alongside people. This is not about talking to people. This is actually about just talking with people, engaging, discussing. And hopefully when you're doing this, it'll trigger a curiosity. It'll trigger a wonder. Hang on a sec. I used to believe this. Maybe there's something else that I need to look at. Maybe there's something else that I need to consider. And with and we'll go into some of the disciplines, it's also about developing a confidence in discussing subjects that you're currently unfamiliar with. So there'll be a bit of a learning curve in that for those of you that are not that familiar with the area. Also, to understand what the objections and barriers are for people that you're talking to. Because you'll hear a lot of the times in life, they will actually say, no, the Bible's not true. Science proves this. What about evil? There are a range of issues which will be the objections, and you need to start understanding where they are coming from and what those objections might be. And in this, hopefully find a process that enables you to have those discussions. However, there are some critical rules of engagement. First and foremost, don't ever lose sight that your foundation is in Christ. Really, really important. Because this is not about winning an argument. This is actually about having a discussion. The winning of the argument is up to him. It's not up to you. So rather have the discussion and let the win take place elsewhere, which I'm sure it will happen. And grace. We are all here because we understand the grace that we actually need in our lives. So the issue is B, defend your faith, but do not be defensive about it. Because when you're defensive, it's the same as reacting versus responding. If you react, you're likely to get emotional, you're likely to say the wrong thing. Whereas if you consider what you say and you respond, it's a far more reasoned answer that you will put forward to somebody. So really make sure that you are not defensive about your faith, but you have the ability to defend it. Now, my personal journey, some people, they come to faith through this immediate road to Damascus experience. It happens in an instant, and all of a sudden their lives are changed. Mine was very different. Mine was the slow dissolve, understanding more, reading more, and that has been my journey. And I followed a range of people. Frank Turek, who's got a site called Cross-Examined, William Lane Craig, John Lennox. There are a whole host of people. There are amazing resources. But ultimately, within all of this, the destination is what is important, not how you get there. So there might be some people that take a completely different road to what I've taken, but it's the destination ultimately that is really what is so important. Now, everybody's got different levels of interest. Do you want me to use the hand mic? Okay. There's the historicity. So how valid is the Bible and the history in the Bible? There's the archaeology. And within all of this, you actually start developing and building a knowledge of the particular subject that you're interested in. I just happen to love science. That's one of my key areas of interest. But everybody will be quite different in terms of the areas that they enjoy and that they really like. One of the big questions that will come up, and that is the problem of evil. Natural evil versus man-made evil. And that I would certainly defer to Aubrey to take on as an objection. But it is a very difficult one to use. And so within the science aspect here, I'm going to just go through three components, which I'll illustrate in a moment. But also you need to understand that there are 4 stages of learning. The first stage is you don't know what you don't know. So you're actually completely in the dark. Whilst you might think that you know something, that's not necessarily the case. Then somebody illustrates to you, hang on a sec, did you know this? And you say, no. Or now all of a sudden you know that you don't know. Then you learn how to do it, but you still need a lot of exercise and practice at doing it. And the final stage is you brushing your teeth. You don't even think about how you brush your teeth. So now you know, but you don't even realize that you're actually doing it in the process of what you're doing. So an apologetics will fall into this space a little bit, because if you're going to embark on a new learning, or any subject really, you'll suddenly find yourself, oh, that's interesting. Let me go there and discover a bit more. And eventually the more you read, the more familiar you become with the subject. Be careful of how you interpret this. The Bible can be a weak argument when you're talking to somebody on apologetics, because remember that it is not their book. They do not believe in the Bible. So if it's your starting point, it's our strength, it's our book, it's what we believe in, we understand that, but it's not necessarily a good argument to use when you're discussing, because they say, well, what's the Bible? It's just a collection of writings by some people. It could be being changed. So be mindful how you use it. Don't use it as your starting point, but however, it does illustrate exceptionally well the points that you want to make. And that'll become evident. Things can easily get set up to be antagonistic. So is the question correctly phrased in it? Is it God versus science? Because if you set it up like that, the moment you put a versus between two things, immediately you're actually in opposition to each other. And so if you're having a discussion with somebody who just believes completely in science, be mindful that you don't set it up as an either or, that it actually is far more a discussion subject, that you actually approach them and listen to them. Really avoid the antagonism that you're in one camp or the other camp. And I think if we look at society today, we have become so polarized that this can just further exacerbate that situation. So we don't want to have more polarization in this world. We want to have less polarization. We want to walk alongside people. So most importantly, when you frame this and set it up, do not set it up as a versus. This is rather, how do you respond to people that have only got the Bible as their view? Objections, scientific objections. Where's the proof that God exists? Now, we can't prove that God exists. We know He exists. However, this is one of the objections that you'll come up with. And you have to be mindful that you don't put yourself on the defensive, because you can say to them, well, prove God doesn't exist. Now, you can't prove a negative. However, ultimately, there's a collection of evidence, because just to illustrate quickly, the life of Alexander the Great was written some 400 to 500 years after his death. That's when they first started writing about him. So there's no proof that Alexander the Great was actually there. Nobody was there. There are no eyewitnesses to that. When it comes to the resurrection, there were a number of eyewitnesses, and those accounts have been written down. The scientific evidence proves this. And you need to understand a little bit if you're having a science type discussion and engagement with somebody. Evolution is a really, really big one. And it gets thrown around, and we'll address it in a moment as this, well, it's evolution. And Christians are often accused of God of the gaps. When you don't understand something, well, God did it. So that's one of their major objections as well. So we'll see that. And what's happened, so there's this abundance of data that we need to find a way of working through. We live in a world with more and more information, but almost less knowledge. I think we're getting dumbed down as we have these vast quantities at our fingertips, but we're almost understanding less. It's like society is going backwards. You know, Aubrey was talking about manhood. The construct of a man has been lost in society, and a good term for being strong yet gentle is the iron hand in a velvet glove. So you have to avoid setting up the conflict and look at and understand the different worldviews. And that worldview might be that you're discussing with a Muslim. What does the Quran say? There are a number of Christian apologists that actually run channels talking specifically to Muslims. They understand the Quran inside out. They understand the hadiths. So there are different people. Ultimately, we want to win as many to Christ as possible. But the winning ultimately is up to God. It's not up to us. We need to lay the foundation and the groundwork and get the questions and trigger the curiosity. So with this abundance of information, what has happened is that there's this perceived gap that has been developed between faith and science. It's almost like we're stuck in the dark ages because we still believe a book which is a few thousand years old, yet science has gone on and done so much. Well, what's quite interesting is that that gap is not what it actually is. And there's so much that is in fact explained by what we read in the Bible. And so we're going to look at 3 scientific components this morning: creation, design, and evolution. So those are the challenging questions, but there are a host of them, and all of them can be developed over a long period of time. Then just some basics in terms of a discussion strategy, and the one particular one that we'll look at, and then I'll try and summarize it at the end. But this is largely about how to approach a discussion and then to look at some specific points in that discussion. So when it comes to creation, it's going to be stepping out of our comfort zones a little bit, a lot of people. But William Lane Craig has taken this argument and he's written a book just on the Kalam cosmological argument, which states that everything that began to exist had a beginning. The universe exists, therefore the universe had a beginning. It sounds so simple on the face of it, but we don't suddenly have the drum box popping into existence. If you wanted a drum box, it would have to be created by somebody. There was a reason. So everything begins to exist, but there's a cause for that beginning. Now, the Big Bang Theory has been thrown around, that the universe began to exist. This is not an argument about young Earth or old Earth. This is actually illustrating that there was, in fact, a starting point to the universe. And they know this because if you go forward, with telescopes, they started seeing from the distant galaxies that there was a red light that was emitting. It was called redshift. And this then made them realize that the universe is expanding. So it's a bit like a balloon. If a balloon expands, you know that it actually goes back to its collapse point if you pop it. The universe, they could actually then take backwards and realize there was actually a start to it all. Not only that, there was a start to time, to space, and to matter. Now, I find that quite remarkable to think that there's a start to time, because we can't imagine our lives without time in it. But there was a time when there was no time. There was no space, there was no matter. And there's broad agreement across the scientific community. What we have, in the beginning, God created. So we know that there was a beginning to the universe. What is the cause? That is the bigger question. Now, the scientists will try and propose a range of causes. When they realized that there was a beginning to the earth, they now started coming up with, well, maybe there's a multi-universe. In other words, there are multiple universes, infinite number of universes. So we've believed for so long that in the beginning God created. The scientists in the past years have said, well, the universe has always existed, it's been a steady state, we just don't understand it. Then they developed telescopes and more sophisticated equipment, and they realized, hang on a sec, this universe is expanding. So it has a starting point. What is missing from this is there's a personal agent involved. Why would there be a beginning to the universe? So if you make a cup of tea, you can describe how the tea is made, that the water boils, you steep the tea bag in, etc. But it doesn't tell you the why. The cup of tea is that you actually feel like a cup of tea to go with your piece of cake. So what is the why? There's a personal agent involved to actually want to have the universe. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Goldilocks zone. The Goldilocks zone is that Earth is in just the right spot. It's spinning at the right speed. It's not too close to the sun, it's not too far from the sun. So it maintains its orbit. It's at the right angle to the sun. So we have the seasons every year. We live in such a perfect zone to actually facilitate life. It is utterly, utterly remarkable. And there are a range of other technical aspects and scientific aspects that show us how perfect our world is that we in fact live in. Anywhere outside of this, we wouldn't survive. Our gravitational pull, our gravitational force is just right for us to survive. So this Goldilocks zone really makes a big difference to our lives, otherwise we wouldn't really be here. The next element that we're going to look at is design. So when we look at these components, a motor car, beautiful motor car, a dress, jewelry, look around anything that is made, we recognize instantly that somebody designed this. That there was a mind, there was an intention to do it, there was a passion about it, there was a creativity about it, and it cuts across so many disciplines. The chairs, the TV, all of these aspects that we look around us, we recognize instantly that they were designed by somebody, and they're design awards, and people are Steve Jobs for creating Apple. However, why is it that design is not recognized when it comes to these? We recognize that, but these are far more complex, far more detailed, far more intricate. Just like to see the person on earth that can create these types of animals. And if we just take the bird and we look a little bit more detail at the wing of a bird and at the feather, it is absolutely remarkable when you go into the detail. And it's going to lead on to the next one of looking at evolution. But you look at this and you think to yourself, who had the mind to actually create something so unbelievably intricate? When we look at the human body, how every organ interacts with everything else, how our blood system flows, the interactivity of all is just utterly, utterly remarkable. And I'll now move on to evolution. And this is one of the big things that gets thrown around in society today. Evolution is just this big word. However, there are different aspects to evolution. One is there's chemical evolution. Where did all the molecules come from? Where did all the elements, the hydrogen, the helium, the iron, where did they come from? They weren't just existing there, they were created. Those then become all of the building blocks of life. There is macroevolution. Macroevolution is the creation of new species. So that's a dog, a cat, a horse. What they would have you believe is that these are all consequential from a starting point. But there is a major issue that they do face. Microevolution, we're all undergoing a bit of microevolution because our children are not the same as us. If we go and live in a cold climate, our blood thickens. So that's just an adaptation that we have that is built into our systems. If we exercise a lot, we don't produce the same level of lactic acid. You can almost argue that that's the way our body is adapting. It's a level of microevolution. The problem with evolution, I would argue, is a probability hurdle. There are so many small components that need to change and just be right every single time. How do you accomplish that when you've got millions and trillions of decisions that always have to be right? What about all the wrong decisions? We look at an animal, we think that that's actually been developed perfectly. We don't see all the mistakes. And they would have us believe that this all just started from a simple organism and then it just repeated itself all the time. They discovered a whole range of fossils called the Cambrian explosion. And what astounded the scientists is that there were no precursors to that, because the Darwinism and the neo-Darwinism, the new Darwinism suggested that there would be this natural progression through all of the elements, and all of a sudden they discovered all of these different components and new species just popping into being. They've not had an explanation for that yet. If you repeat something often enough, it starts becoming the truth. And I'm not saying they're repeating a lie, I'm just saying if you repeat something often enough, it becomes a truth. And this was used extensively in certain areas. But a really, really great discussion strategy when you're talking to somebody is, what do you mean by that? And how did you come to that conclusion? And I think that this is very good just for general discussion too. If you're having a discussion with somebody, no matter what it is, because we throw big statements around all too often. Oh no, well, it's evolution, or it's this, or it's that. So put the question back to them, what do you mean by that? And how do you come to that conclusion? Frank Turek, who runs a site called Cross-Examined, and we'll provide you with a list of the apologists that I think are really worthwhile going to and listening to for different disciplines. But within this, what we're really trying to do is take people on a journey. Take people on a journey where they're at a point now where they believe it's absolutely impossible. And it's just a series of steps, little bit by little bit, so that ultimately they go through those steps from the impossible, they start getting into unlikely, and ultimately they get to a position which is certain. And our trick and our role is to try and move people on just one small step. Even if they're within the impossible and they go from the one end of the impossible to closer to improbable. That's really how we engage with people. It's wonderful to have the knowledge ourselves, but I think that within this, our knowledge is important to share with other people, not just to stay where we are and circulate and talk amongst ourselves. We need to be discussing this with others around us. So in summary, we all walk different paths to our discovery of faith. Let's remember that. So everybody will have a different route that they take. Engage, defend, do not be defensive. Find the common ground on differing worldviews. And I think that it's important to remember that we probably have a lot more in common with each other than we've got differences. And it's to find the common ground initially, and then to start actually discussing the differences, particularly when it comes to worldview. Listen more, talk less. I think it was Larry King used to say, if I talk today, I'm not really going to learn anything. So if I keep quiet, I'll learn a lot more. And this is about discovering where the other person is, so that you can actually answer their questions as opposed to telling them what to do and what to think. And I would suggest that you go on a bit of a learning curve to understand some of the core concepts related to apologetics. It's amazing. Find an area that interests you and learn a little bit more about that. But ultimately, within all of this is not about the technology, the technical aspects of it. You have to remain with Jesus. Never forget him, and always engage with grace. This is about walking alongside people, not leading people as such. You really have to walk alongside people. This you may find interesting. Over the past 100-odd years since the inception of the Nobel Prize, some 80% are either of Christian faith or Jewish faith, or a connection to that. So man believed that they would find laws in nature, because they believed there was a lawgiver. They believed in God. So they started looking for the laws in nature. And so these scientists, if they believed that there was a conflict between God and science, it's unlikely that they would really be looking for all of this. I think that the fact that there's such a large number of Jewish Nobel Prize winners, when you think that there are, some 10 million Jews around the world in a population of a global population of 7 million, yet they're 20-odd% of the Nobel Prize winners, is quite a remarkable achievement. really out of this world. So if I were asked the question, how do you reconcile science and God? This would be my answer, or my answer would be along these lines. When I look at the universe, science has shown that there was a beginning, a singular event, at which space, time and matter began, just as described in the Bible. I can look around me at the utter wonder of the natural world, the variety and exquisite design of mammals, birds, plants, insects, and how they interact in a perfect ecosystem. And that virtually all these species have male and female to be able to reproduce. Just think about that. Male and female in every species, with very, very few exceptions. When it comes to time, which is often the scientist's fallback, time is actually your enemy. It's not your friend. Time is your enemy, because the stability of the molecules on which we are all built are degraded very quickly with time. And I think we will all attest to the fact that as you get older, your body is no longer as strong as it used to be, unless you have a Paul moment. And that I cannot believe that this is the consequence of trillions of random chances. And then at a personal level, I've experienced the deep peace of knowing that I have Christ as my Savior, and have felt the grace that He has poured out on me. So there are the two components to it, but we must never lose sight of the faith, of the fact that it's Christ that has actually saved us. Within all of this, Robert Louis Stevenson had a wonderful quote I think we should remember, and that is, don't judge each day by the harvest that you reap, but judge it by the seeds that you plant. So this issue of talking to people about apologetics, or talking to them about Christianity, is about planting seeds and let the curiosity be tickled, that they will want to ask more questions and look for more. So in conclusion, I would actually say that science is an expression of God. So the verses does not come into it at all. And in 2 weeks' time, I'll be looking at probably one of the most contentious subjects, and that's the origin of life. Because there are a range of origin of life researchers around the world, and there are some very interesting facts that will come out of that. So as we go through this week, I'd love to have any questions that are asked, so please feel free to challenge me to ask questions. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make His face to shine upon you, be gracious to you. The Lord lift up His countenance to you and give you His peace. In Jesus' name, amen.